I'm so pleased to be joined by three incredible, motivated, and outspoken Jewish student advocates who have a lot to teach us about pride and proactive strategies. Welcome to Outspoken. Thank you for taking the time. Rudy, I'm going to start with you. What makes Students Supporting Israel, or SSI, different from any other pro-Israel advocacy group?
Well, first of all, who we are and also what we do. Who we are is a grassroots student movement, meaning we're not based on outside organizations pushing materials onto students. We're based on empowering the actual students there. And we also understand that every campus is different, so every campus has to do their own thing, but at the same time, we're all connected. Secondly, what we do, we're not right-wing, one state, two state, left-wing. We're not here to push a political agenda onto a democratic country. We're here to empower Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, and their story and their culture.
So that's an essential difference. It's not about pro-Israel advocacy per se. It's about civil rights advocacy and being a proud Zionist.
Exactly. I take the term advocacy as almost a cheerleader. We're not cheerleaders. We're players on the team. And we don't use advocacy, we use activism. And we talk about the rights of the Jewish people and their connection to their land.
And so the events that you do, have they ever tried to shut you down? And how do you overcome that?
They can always try. I mean, they come to campus, they come and shout, but eventually campus security escorts them out. They've tried to pull down our flyers. They've tried many different tactics to silence us. But in reality, it's up to us if we choose to be silenced or not.
So you're not going to be intimidated. And Adela, tell us, what is the atmosphere like at NYU today? Do Jewish students feel comfortable being themselves? Are they physically threatened?
NYU changed tremendously in the last 4 months, from student government resolutions to disruptions at events to actually a student being physically assaulted.
Physically assaulted?
Physically assaulted. At one of our events, we actually had a rave in the park that we do every year for Yom HaAtzmaut. Nothing was different about this year except that there was a mobilized protest on the other side. Two members from the protesting groups, one of them stole one of our Israeli flags, lit it on fire, starting a 5-foot flag fire in the middle of a New York public park. Another crossed to our side, took the microphone from a female student, grabbing her arm, all this on tape.
Oh my God, so assault, physical destruction of private property. And what does the administration do? Do they take this seriously?
So that's actually a great question. Those two students were arrested by NYPD and let off without bail. But the administration, for some reason, doesn't seem to be doing much against it. So right now, I guess our main challenge is working with the administration to say if NYPD felt compelled to arrest two individuals for reckless endangerment on an NYU campus, why is the administration letting them roam our halls?
So do you think SJP, which I'm assuming is one of the groups that is behind this Students for Justice in Palestine, do you think they should be banned from NYU?
After the incidents that happened at our rave, SJP and JVP actually stood with their comrades and organized a sit-in in the courthouse, and they camped overnight. They had over 70 students there. If someone from my side physically assaulted someone from the other side, as a president of a club, I would be horrified and denounce those actions.
They are not peaceful activists.
No, they're not.
No, they are not human rights activists. And Justin, I want to bring you in. Why has the other side, so to speak, been so successful with their advocacy? Does it have something to do with this intersectionality thing we hear
So much
about?
of their activism has involved reaching out and branching out to so many different cultural and political groups on campus, in many different campuses across the nation and at large in the world. And the way that they're able to send their message is through their legitimization of being present. And what pro-Israel activists need to do to reach out and delve into that intersectional narrative that is developing the future of this country is to be present as genuine allies for various causes and to start telling our narrative equally in that exchange instead of being submissive allies or instead of being out of the picture wholesome.
Right, and so telling our narrative, it's not, again, about talking about pro-Israel stuff. It's about telling about the indigenous Jewish people, the story of the Jewish people, and
Absolutely.
Zionism being a progressive value. It's about being on the offense, not the defense, is it not?
Absolutely. I think being on the offensive means setting the terms for yourself, for your organization, for the pro-Israel cause at large, and not bending to the standards at which you're being subjected by the anti-Israel presence or movements on campus. These campaigns cannot delegitimize us for who we are so long as we know our narrative and we know how to tell our narrative and embrace that narrative in various different activities.
Have you ever felt physically threatened on an American campus? Have you witnessed anyone being threatened or assaulted?
I have felt physically threatened. Actually, as recently as a few weeks ago, at one of our recent events at UCLA, co-sponsored by SSI of Santa Monica College, we had lots of pushing aside of students trying to get inside to protest and shut down our event. So I've experienced that myself, and I've seen further assault happening to other Jewish students on campus. Thankfully, I myself have not experienced that to that degree.
Mm-hmm. Rudy, has the pro-Israel community failed our students? I mean, we spend so much money on advocacy, and yet things are getting worse. What can we do different?
I mean, as long as we're here, we haven't failed. The question is, where do we move from here? Okay, and it's our job in our generation to realize what is the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist movement of this generation. What are they doing to try to destroy us? And instead of being the counter movement to the already counter movement to our right to exist, we have to take our movement and lift it up in itself. We also have to understand, what is the story of Israel? The story of Israel is not the story of cherry tomatoes, waste, technology, drip irrigation. Israel has a right to exist because we're talking about a native people that were displaced from their land by Western imperial powers or other invaders, were persecuted throughout their history in diaspora, and eventually created something called Zionism, which is the most successful indigenous liberation movement that ever existed.
You know, it sounds to me like the mirror effect, the story of being kicked out of your land, subject to apartheid, subject to colonialism, yearning for the right to return. That's our story.
Yes.
And yet the Palestinian Arabs have appropriated that story, and they have used it, and then they're turning it against us. It is so bizarre. You know, what would it take not only for other students to take our movement seriously, but the administration to take seriously? What is your advice to students in terms of how to be organized and how to deal with the administration, Adela?
I think a lot of it is just knowing where you stand, knowing the people that are supporting you, and making sure that everything is on record. I know from my work working with the administration and with any organization, it's when you have a meeting with someone, you have to make sure to follow up and to always have everything down. Because if you spoke to an administrator about something and they don't follow through, you need that paper trail to say, we spoke about this and you are not fulfilling your duty to the students.
And Justin, do you think there's a role here for the legal community, not pro-Israel advocacy groups, but lawyers to help students on campus, either dealing with the administration or filing claims when necessary?
Undoubtedly, absolutely. I believe that students need to know their rights. They need to be aware of what it is that they can do to be able to take justice into their own hands when the administration is either obstructionist or is not doing their fair share to hold students to the full extent of the law universally. So lawyers and legal assistants can help students and empower them to feel a motivation to pursue their rights and pursue their justice and know about these rights.
And not to be ashamed.
Not to be
we
ashamed.
have every right to assert ourselves like any other minority group. So if you were to say one thing to students who are coming to campus now, one piece of advice, Justin, what would it be?
Be proactive. Set the standards yourself and do not bend to other people that are trying to delegitimize who you are and your cause, for any cause. And that's my best advice to anyone who's trying to get involved and to change and break complacency on campus, to mobilize students as a unified community.
Right, mobilize ahead of time. Don't be reactive. Don't wait for something to happen and then have to be reactive to it, but be proactive. Adela.
As a Mexican, Syrian, Jewish woman, the hardest thing for me is being afraid of being myself. So if I could tell any student coming into campus is, you fight for what you believe in and don't let anyone around you tell you otherwise. Understand your narrative and be able to put it forward.
Rudy.
Know your story, because if you don't, other people will tell it for you.
Brilliant. That's great. I am so grateful for the three of you for coming on. Yashar koach. Keep doing what you're doing. Fight the good fight. We are always available for you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.